Just a few weeks ago, my mother was still laughing in the garden. The air smelled of wet soil and blooming roses as she called me over to help her move a flower pot too heavy for her hands. She said she wanted to plant something new this spring. White lilies, her favorite. I promised her I'd come back next weekend to help. But next weekend never came. Now, I'm standing in the rain, watching her coffin disappear beneath the earth. The sound of the shovel hitting wet soil echoes like thunder in my chest. People murmur prayers I can't hear. My son tugs at my sleeve, asking where Grandma went. I can't answer him because I don't know. I can't accept that she's gone. My father isn't here. He didn't come. While the sky weeps over her grave, he's somewhere in Hawaii, smiling beside a woman half his age, posting photos of champagne and sunsets. I scroll through his feed with numb fingers, the reflection of his grin burning through my tears. When everyone leaves, I'm still standing there, soaked, staring at the grave until the caretaker turns off the lights. I whisper a promise to her, I'll find out why. That night, the storm outside hadn't stopped. The wind rattles the windows and thunder crawls across the horizon like an angry god. I sit alone in the living room, the photo of my mother beside the flickering lamp. My phone buzzes once, then again. A message. Unknown number. No, my mother's number. 4 words. I'm not dead. Come. My hand goes cold. The screen blurs. My heartbeat pounds so loud it feels like the whole room is shaking. And that's when I realize, tonight my mother's story isn't over. My name is Michael Reed, and for most of my life I believed peace was something you could build, brick by brick, like the houses I designed. I'm 38 years old, an architect living in Portland, Oregon, a city that never really wakes up but never truly sleeps either. The rain here is like background music, constant, quiet, comforting. My life was steady, predictable, even beautiful in its simplicity. Every morning, sunlight slipped through the tall windows of our cedar house by the river. I'll be continuing this story soon, but before we move on, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story is reaching around the world. My wife, Hannah, would already be up, humming softly while she packed lunch for our daughter, Lily, who's 6 and thinks every cloud in the sky looks like a bunny. I'd sit at the kitchen island, sketching outlines for a new project, while the smell of coffee and toast made everything feel safe. I used to tell myself I'd won at life. Loving wife, a child who adored me, and a career I'd built on my own terms. No shortcuts, no handouts, especially not from my father. My father, Gregory Reed, was a man who didn't believe in softness. He built one of the biggest real estate companies in Oregon, Reed & Sons Construction. Though I was never the son, he wanted to inherit it. He used to say, "Dreams don't pay bills, Michael. Concrete does." To him, architecture was a hobby, not a career. He wanted a partner in his empire. I wanted to design parks where kids like Lily could play. That difference, small at first, grew into a canyon between us. My mother, Evelyn, was the bridge between us. The kind of woman who could calm a storm just by speaking. She taught art at a community college, loved jazz, and had the habit of leaving sticky notes on our fridge with little reminders like, "Call Mom," or "Don't forget to breathe." She understood me in a way my father never could. She used to say, "Michael, it's okay to be different. You don't need to build his walls to prove your worth." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until she was gone. The day it happened started like any other. I dropped Lily off at school, kissed Hannah goodbye, and drove downtown through the morning drizzle. At 10:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, thinking it was a client. But then it buzzed again and again. When I finally answered, a voice I didn't recognize said, "Mr. Reed, this is Dr. Miller from Providence Medical Center. I'm so sorry to inform you your mother passed away this morning. Cardiac arrest. We did everything we could." I stopped breathing. The world blurred into a ringing silence. My pen fell from my hand and rolled across the desk. I don't remember leaving the office. I only remember the sound of the rain against the car windshield as I drove to the hospital. Everything felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's tragedy unfold. When I got there, my father was already speaking with the doctor. His expression was composed, even bored. Not one tear, not one word to me. I wanted to ask him how he could stand there like that. but my voice refused to come out. That night, Hannah tried to hold me, but I couldn't feel anything, just the echo of my mother's voice in my head and the silence she left behind. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. My father said he'd try to make it, but I already knew he wouldn't, and I was right. Because while we stood at my mother's grave, rain soaking through our coats, my father was in Maui, laughing, smiling, holding hands with a woman young enough to be his assistant. And as I stared down at my mother's coffin, something in me broke quietly, not from grief, but from the certainty that she deserved better. The sky that morning looked like it had been painted in grief, heavy gray clouds pressing low over the city, the kind that promised rain before the first shovelful of dirt even hit the ground. The funeral was held at the small cemetery just outside Portland, tucked between tall pines and the whispering sound of water from a nearby creek. My mother would have loved that she always said she wanted to rest somewhere with trees, so the wind could still talk to her. But I wasn't ready for that conversation. I stood beside her coffin, my umbrella trembling in my hand, the cold seeping through my black suit. People came, one after another, faces blurred by rain and tears. Some hugged me, some just nodded awkwardly, unsure what to say. She was such a kind woman, they kept repeating. She deserved better. I couldn't argue with that. Hannah stood close holding our daughter, Lily, who kept staring at the casket, her small hand clutching a single white daisy. "Daddy," she whispered, "is Grandma sleeping?" My throat closed. I crouched, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said quietly. "She's resting." She frowned. "Then why's everyone crying?" I couldn't answer. I just pulled her closer and felt her tears soak through my shirt. The priest's voice droned in the distance, reading verses about peace, heaven, and forgiveness, words that barely reached me. All I could think about was that my father wasn't here. He'd sent a single text that morning. Busy with a meeting. Handle everything. A meeting. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, forcing myself to breathe, to stand still, to keep my composure. Because if I didn't, I'd explode right there in front of everyone. When the service ended, the mourners began to leave one by one. Only a few stayed, my mother's close friends, women from her art classes, all with red eyes and trembling lips. One of them, Mrs. Palmer, a frail woman with silver hair and paint-stained fingers, approached me slowly. "Your mother was so proud of you," she said, her voice fragile but full of warmth. "She told me you were building something beautiful, a park for children." I nodded, my throat tight. "She said it reminded her of her students," Mrs. Palmer continued. "She wanted you to have this." She reached into her purse and handed me a small envelope, slightly wrinkled, my mother's handwriting across the front. "For Michael." My breath caught. The paper felt warm in my palm, like it had been waiting for me. I started to open it, but Mrs. Palmer placed a hand on mine. "Not here," she said softly. "When you're ready." I tucked it into my jacket pocket, suddenly aware of the cold wind brushing past. As the last few guests drifted away, I stood there alone. The sound of rain tapping against the coffin lid felt like a cruel rhythm. Soft, steady, final. The undertaker gave me a nod, waiting for permission to lower it. I hesitated, staring at the name etched into the bronze plate. Evelyn Grace Reed, 1959 to 2024. My chest tightened. I whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." The ropes creaked. The coffin descended slowly, disappearing into the earth. My knees weakened, and I had to grip the edge of the railing to stay standing. Hannah rushed to my side, her voice a blur through the wind. "Michael, come on, let's go home." "It's too cold." But I couldn't move, because something about all of this felt wrong. My mother had been healthy. No history of heart problems. No warnings. Just gone. And my father, no grief, no explanation, no presence. Just a silence that felt rehearsed. The caretaker closed the grave, his shovel slicing through the muddy earth. The sound echoed like thunder. I turned away, clutching the daisy Lily had dropped. The petals were crushed, soaked, fragile, just like everything I felt inside. By the time we reached the car, the rain was falling harder. I sat in the driver's seat, numb, watching the windshield blur into streaks of silver. Hannah rested her hand on mine. "We'll get through this," she whispered. She'd want you to live, not drown in it. I nodded, but my eyes drifted to the rearview mirror, to the lonely stretch of road leading back to the cemetery. That night, when the house had gone quiet and everyone was asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The unopened letter lay on the table beside my cold cup of tea. I stared at it for what felt like hours. The clock ticked past midnight. Rain pattered gently on the window. I finally reached for the envelope. My fingers brushed the flap when my phone, sitting face down beside it, buzzed once. Then again. I turned it over. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Mom. A message slid into view, 5 words that stopped my heart. I'm not dead. Come now. The rain hadn't stopped since the funeral. It was as if the sky itself refused to move on. For 3 nights I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the coffin sinking into the mud, heard the thud of the earth sealing it. But what haunted me more than anything was that message. I'm not dead. Come now. I kept reading it over and over again, searching for logic, for some cruel explanation. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe someone cloned her number. Maybe my grief had twisted reality. I even showed it to Hannah the next morning, hoping she'd laugh and tell me it was fake. But the moment she saw the sender's name, her smile faded. Michael, maybe you should delete that, she whispered. You need rest, not ghosts. I didn't delete it. By the 3rd night, something inside me snapped. It was close to midnight when I grabbed my coat and flashlight. The air outside was cold enough to sting. The streets were empty, the kind of silence that only exists after rain. I drove through the mist, headlights carving a narrow path through the dark. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I wasn't sure if I was chasing proof or losing my mind. The cemetery sat on the edge of town, wrapped in fog and shadow. As I parked by the iron gate, my phone buzzed again. Same number. Same words. Come now. My pulse hammered in my throat. I opened the gate, its hinges moaning like an old warning. The beam of my flashlight cut through the fog, bouncing off rows of headstones that glistened with water. Every step felt heavier, the ground soft beneath my shoes. When I reached her grave, I froze. Someone had been there. The soil looked disturbed, footprints pressed deep in the mud. Fresh ones. My breath came in short bursts. I crouched down, running my fingers across the wet dirt. The flowers from the funeral were gone, all except one. A single white daisy lay neatly across the tombstone. The same flower Lily had dropped. I looked around, scanning the darkness. Nothing but fog and shadows. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Somewhere behind me. Who's there? My voice cracked. No answer. Just the soft tap of shoes against gravel. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. For a moment, the beam caught movement. A silhouette slipping between the trees, just beyond the far row of graves. Wait! I shouted, sprinting after it. My shoes sank into the mud, cold rain lashing my face. The figure moved fast, too fast, gliding more than running. When I turned the corner, there was no one there, just the sound of the wind sighing through the pines. Then, faintly, a whisper. Michael. I spun around, my heart pounding. The voice was unmistakable, soft, trembling, full of warmth. My mother's voice. Mom! I called out. My breath fogged in the air. Where are you? Silence. Then another whisper, closer this time. Don't trust him. The beam of my flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging me into darkness. I cursed under my breath, smacking it against my palm until it flickered back to life. The graveyard looked the same, but now something glinted in the mud near the tombstone. I knelt and brushed the dirt aside. It was a key, small, brass, cold against my fingers. Tied to it with a string was a note, half soaked by the rain. I held it under the flashlight. 2 words, written in my mother's handwriting. For truth. I stood there, the wind whipping through the trees, the note trembling in my hand. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like an answer I didn't want to hear. I didn't remember driving home. I just remember the key digging into my palm, leaving a mark. I locked the door behind me, peeled off my wet coat, and sat at the dining table staring at the object under the light. It wasn't a house key. The shape was wrong. It looked older, maybe for a safe or a small chest. I went to the living room. opened the drawer where I'd placed my mother's funeral envelope. I finally tore it open, my hands shaking. Inside was a folded letter, her handwriting again. "Michael, if you're reading this, I can't say goodbye yet. There are things you don't know about your father, things I kept hidden to protect you. If I disappear, follow the truth. You'll find it where everything began." I stared at the words until they blurred through tears. The key glimmered faintly under the lamplight, and for the first time, I felt it. Not grief, not confusion, but fear. Because deep down, I knew my mother hadn't written this in peace. She'd written it in warning. The night I found the key, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every shadow felt alive. The rain outside hadn't stopped. It beat against the windows like impatient fingers. I sat at the kitchen table with the key on one side, the letter on the other, and 1,000 questions spinning in my head. Follow the truth. You'll find it where everything began. Those words echoed over and over. Everything began could only mean one place, the house I grew up in. My parents' mansion, the one I hadn't set foot in since the funeral. By morning, I'd already made up my mind. I kissed Hannah on the forehead, told her I had to check on some property plans for work, and drove straight toward the old estate. The mansion stood at the edge of Forest Park, behind a rusting iron gate and a driveway long enough to forget where it led. The house looked the same, with white stone walls, black shutters, and perfect symmetry. But it felt empty now, stripped of life. Even the birds avoided it. I parked the car, got out, and let myself in with the spare key I still had. The air inside was cold, stale, thick with the smell of dust and something else, something like old perfume, my mother's perfume. My heart clenched. I followed the scent through the hallway, past the portraits, until I reached her art studio. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Her easel still stood by the window. Half-finished paintings leaned against the walls, colors frozen mid-stroke. I ran my hand along one, a field of white lilies. Then I saw it. The same brass keyhole as the one on my kitchen table, built into the leg of the wooden desk. Hidden in plain sight. My pulse raced as I slid the key into place and turned. I'll be continuing this story soon, but before we move on, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story's reaching around the world. A faint click echoed in the silent room. A small compartment popped open, revealing a black flash drive wrapped in tissue paper. Taped to it was another note in her handwriting. "If he finds out I'm alive, he'll finish what he started." My stomach dropped. The words felt like ice. "Alive?" I whispered the word out loud, afraid of its meaning. I pocketed the flash drive and turned to leave, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, I froze. Footsteps. Slow, steady, familiar. I ducked behind the doorway, holding my breath. A tall figure moved past the staircase, coat collar up, phone in hand. My father. I hadn't seen him since before the funeral. He looked older, sharper, like a man who hadn't slept in weeks but refused to break. He walked into the living room and poured himself a drink, talking quietly on the phone. "Yes, it's done. No, she won't be a problem anymore." I felt my entire body turn to ice. She won't be a problem anymore. He hung up and stood by the window staring out at the rain, completely unaware I was watching him. For a moment I saw something strange, a flicker of fear in his reflection. Then his phone buzzed again. He answered, his voice lower this time. "I told you the hospital handled it." "No, there's no evidence. She signed everything." My breath caught. The hospital signed everything. He wasn't talking about business. When he turned toward the hallway, I slipped quietly out through the side door and ran to my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I didn't go home. I drove. Aimlessly. My mind replaying every detail, the letter, the message, the perfume, his words. By the time I stopped, I was in the old neighborhood near the river. That's when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. No text this time, just a voice message. I hesitated, then pressed play. "Michael," the voice whispered. "It's me." My heart stopped. "Mom!" Static crackled, but her voice came through clearer. "Don't go to him. Don't trust him." I had to do it. I had to fake my death. He was going to kill me. The phone slipped from my hand. The message kept playing through the car speakers, her words trembling with fear. He wanted everything, Michael. The company, the insurance, the accounts. I found out what he did to your grandfather, how he— The message cut off in a burst of static. I sat there, shaking, staring at the rain dripping down the windshield. Alive. She was alive. My mother, the woman I buried, was out there, hiding, terrified. And my father, the man who'd raised me to believe in strength and success, was a monster. I slammed my hands on the steering wheel, gasping. 1,000 emotions fought inside me: grief, rage, disbelief, and love. Then one thing cut through them all. Resolve. If my mother had risked everything to survive, then I would risk everything to protect her. I whispered into the dark, my voice shaking but sure. I'll help you, Mom. We'll expose him. Whatever it takes. Days blurred into nights after that. On the surface, my life looked normal again. Still woke up at 6, brewed coffee, and kissed Hannah goodbye before heading to the office. But inside, everything had changed. Every second of my day now lived under a secret pulse, a quiet rhythm of deception. At work, I drafted blueprints and discussed building permits. But my mind was somewhere else entirely, in the shadows of my father's empire, buried inside numbers, files, and signatures that suddenly looked different. Each email, each business transaction, each archived document felt like a clue in a game I hadn't known I was playing. And every night when the house went quiet, I became someone else. Michael Reed, husband, father, architect by day, hunter of truth by night. The first thing I did was open the flash drive I'd found in my mother's desk. I waited until Hannah and Lily were asleep, dimmed the lights, and connected it to my laptop. The screen flickered, loading a folder named simply EGR Private, my mother's initials. Inside were hundreds of files, scanned contracts, financial statements, and voice memos. I clicked one at random. Her voice came through, faint but steady. It's February 10th, Leonard. He asked me to sign over my shares again. He said it's a formality, but I saw the document. It's not. It's a full transfer. If anything happens to me, he gets everything. Another recording followed, this one quieter, as if she'd whispered it in secret. If you're hearing this, Michael, then I couldn't stop him. Don't believe what they tell you. Look into the offshore accounts. Cayman, Zurich, and something called North Star Holdings. He's hiding it there. My stomach twisted. My father's empire, his success, his spotless reputation, all built on lies. But if I was going to take him down, I needed help. I contacted Mark Jensen, a friend from college who now works as a cyber forensics analyst. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I told him I needed to trace encrypted accounts for an inheritance issue, he didn't hesitate. "Send me what you've got," he said. "And Michael, be careful. Those kinds of people don't play fair." I also reached out to Rebecca Sloan, my mother's old lawyer. A sharp, fearless woman with graying curls and eyes that could slice through excuses. When I told her my mother was alive and that my father had tried to kill her, she didn't look surprised, just quietly furious. "I always suspected," she said. "But without proof, there was nothing I could do. If Evelyn trusted you with that flash drive, it means she gathered enough evidence to bury him." Rebecca helped me organize the chaos. She knew what documents would matter in court, what signatures were faked, and what assets could be traced. She also made sure everything we discovered was duplicated and stored in encrypted cloud drives. Meanwhile, Mark worked his magic. Late one night he called me, his voice hushed with excitement. "You were right. North Star Holdings isn't just a shell company. It's the funnel. There are 3 accounts tied to your father, each moving millions every quarter. Offshore money laundering. And guess who the secondary signer was before her death? Your mother." My pulse raced. That was it. Proof. Enough to tear his reputation apart if I could make it public. But then Mark's tone changed. "Michael, one more thing. These accounts aren't just frozen assets. Someone's been transferring small amounts out of them in the past week. Active movement. Meaning whoever's behind it knows someone's digging." I froze. "You think he knows?" "I think," Mark said slowly, "he's starting to suspect." For the next few nights I lived like a ghost. I stopped using my personal phone, switched to encrypted messaging apps to contact Rebecca and Mark. My mother called from hidden numbers, never the same one twice. Her voice always soft, always trembling. "Stay careful," she'd say. "He's watching everything." One night I came home from work and found the front gate slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. Hannah and Lily were upstairs reading. I walked through the yard, flashlight in hand, checking the garage, the side door, the locks. Everything looked fine until I noticed a footprint in the wet soil near the fence. Heavy, boot-shaped, not mine. I told myself it could be nothing. A delivery worker, a neighbor, anyone. But deep down, I knew better. Later that evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing the documents Rebecca had uploaded, a new email popped up on my screen. No subject, no sender. Just one line in the message body. "Stop looking where you shouldn't, Michael." My blood turned to ice. I looked around the dark room, every shadow now alive, every sound a threat. My laptop fan hummed softly, the only thing keeping me grounded. For the first time since this began, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit. I wasn't just uncovering my father's secrets anymore. Someone was already watching me. The walls were closing in on him, and he didn't even know it yet. 2 weeks after I found the offshore accounts, the first cracks in my father's empire began to show. Subtle at first, a journalist asking about discrepancies in Reed & Son's financial disclosures, an anonymous post on LinkedIn questioning how a mid-tier construction firm had managed to expand so fast overseas. Then came the whispers: missing funds, illegal mergers, shell companies. I didn't post anything directly. I wasn't reckless enough for that. But I gave the right breadcrumbs to the right people. I slipped digital copies of contracts and audio snippets from my mother's recordings to Rebecca, who in turn passed them to her contacts in financial journalism. The first article dropped on a quiet Thursday morning. Reed & Sons construction under investigation for financial irregularities. It didn't name my father outright, but everyone knew who ran the company. By noon, it was trending on local business forums. By nightfall, it hit national finance pages. I watched the chaos unfold from my office, the light from my computer screen flickering across my tired face. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly I felt the weight of it all, the magnitude of what I was unleashing. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. My father, predictably, went on the offensive. He released a statement through the company's PR team. Baseless rumors, envious competitors, a witch hunt against a man who's built everything from the ground up. And then, as if to prove his invincibility, he did what he always did best: flaunted his power. That weekend, while his company's stocks began to dip and lawyers started whispering about audits, he posted photos online. A lavish dinner in Maui, champagne glasses. The caption read, "Success isn't about surviving storms. It's about owning the rain." I stared at that post for a long time, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. The woman beside him, Vanessa, his mistress, wore a diamond bracelet my mother used to own. When I showed the post to Rebecca, she didn't even flinch. "Good," she said. "Let him be arrogant. The higher he climbs, the harder he'll fall." Over the next few days, she began coordinating with federal investigators and financial auditors. "The key," she said during one of our encrypted calls, "is timing. Once we can tie the offshore accounts to domestic transfers, the IRS and FBI will have no choice but to move in. Until then, keep your head down. No hero moves." I tried to listen. I tried to stay patient. But every time I saw his smug face online, the urge to confront him grew stronger. Then one morning, something changed. A new article appeared, not from Rebecca's network, not from any of the journalists she trusted. This one came from a gossip outlet. The headline hit me like a punch to the gut. "Sources say Michael Reed estranged son. Behind leak targeting his father's business." They had me. Someone inside the company must have traced the digital leaks, maybe through metadata or an intercepted email. The article was vague, but clear enough to destroy my cover. The comment section was vicious. People accusing me of jealousy, betrayal, of trying to destroy my successful father out of greed. That evening, my father made a statement, not to the press, to me. He posted a photo, not of his company, not of Vanessa, but of a family picture. "The three of you, him, my mother, and me, taken when I was maybe 8 years old. He captioned it, "Family isn't perfect, but it's forever." My phone buzzed almost immediately afterward. A call, unknown number. I answered, already knowing the voice that would come through. Michael. Even through the static, his tone was sharp and calm, the same one he used in boardrooms and arguments. "I've been patient. I've tolerated your disrespect. But you've crossed a line you can't uncross." I said nothing. My breath was shallow, my fingers cold around the phone. "You want to talk about your mother?" He continued. "You think you know the truth? You don't. You've been listening to ghosts, Michael, and ghosts have a way of lying." I swallowed hard. "You lied about everything. You lied about her death." He laughed low, cruel. "If you're so sure, then let's talk about it like men. Tonight. At the house." 8 o'clock. I hesitated. "Unless," he added, voice lowering, "you're afraid of what you'll find when the truth finally looks you in the eye." The call ended. I sat there, phone still pressed against my ear, the dial tone droning in my skull. Outside, thunder rolled over Portland again, the same way it had the night of the funeral. I knew what I had to do. He called. He wants to meet. The mansion looked different at night. The white stone walls that once gleamed with pride now looked like the bones of something long dead. As I drove up the winding driveway, every tree seemed to lean closer, as if warning me to turn around. The porch light was on, casting a pale glow across the rain-soaked steps. 8 o'clock sharp. When I stepped inside, the air was heavy with cigar smoke and old memories. My father was waiting for me in the living room, the same room where I used to build Lego castles while he discussed business deals on the phone. Now, the furniture had changed. The air colder, but his expression hadn't. That same calm arrogance, the kind that made people mistake cruelty for confidence. "Michael," he said, leaning back in his chair, a glass of scotch in his hand. "You look tired. Guilt doesn't suit you." I stayed standing. "You should know," I said quietly. "It's not guilt keeping me up at night. It's disgust." He chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Big words for a man who knows so little. You've always been too emotional, too weak to understand how the world works. Your mother spoiled you." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't talk about her like that." He smirked. "Why not? She's gone, isn't she? You of all people should know you buried her." Something in his voice twisted like a knife. He was enjoying this, toying with me, waiting for me to crack. I took a step forward. "You tried to kill her." The smirk faded. "Watch your words." "I have proof," I said, my voice steady but low. "The flash drive, the recordings, the offshore accounts, all of it. She's alive, Dad. She told me everything." For the first time, his composure cracked. His eyes darted away for half a second, not long, but long enough. He set his glass down, his jaw tightening. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then look me in the eye and say it," I demanded. He stood, straightening his coat. "You think you're the hero in this story? You think your mother is innocent? You don't know the half of it, boy. She stole from me, betrayed me, lied to my face for years. She deserved what she got." My heart pounded. She deserved a grave? "She deserved consequences," he hissed, stepping closer. "You're her son. You have her same self-righteous delusions. Do you even know what she did with those accounts? She funneled money to destroy me. She wanted you to take everything I built. I just made sure she couldn't." I felt my vision blur with rage. "You're a liar." He smiled faintly, that same cold, deliberate grin. "And yet here I stand, Michael. Still in control. You can't touch me." But then, from behind him, a sound broke through the silence, the soft creak of a door opening. He turned, slowly, and froze. Standing at the end of the hallway was my mother. Alive. Pale. Trembling, but unmistakably her. She stepped into the light, her raincoat dripping, eyes fixed on him. "You were always in control, Gregory," she said quietly. "Until now." My father stumbled back a step, his mouth opening but no words coming out. His face drained of color. "Evelyn?" he whispered. "That's not possible. You're dead?" She took another step forward. "You made sure of that, didn't you? You signed the papers, bribed the doctors, burned the records. You thought a hospital report could erase me?" He shook his head, his voice trembling for the first time. "No, you don't understand. I had to." "You had to protect your money," she interrupted. "You couldn't let anyone find out you killed your partner and forged his will. So you tried to bury me, too." Police sirens wailed in the distance. My father turned sharply toward me, realization dawning. "You called them," he growled. I met his eyes. "No," I said. She did. Red and blue lights flashed through the rain-streaked windows. The sirens grew louder until the mansion filled with their echo. My father spun toward the door, but 2 officers burst through it before he could move. "Gregory Reed," one of them barked. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder." He struggled, shouting, his voice breaking as they dragged him toward the door. "You'll regret this, Michael. You'll both regret this." My mother stood still, tears mixing with rain on her face. I stepped forward and caught her as her knees buckled. She buried her face in my shoulder, whispering through sobs, "It's over." But as the police car disappeared down the driveway, I stared out through the storm, a chill crawling down my spine. Because I knew something my mother didn't. The accounts weren't all shut down. The money hadn't vanished. Someone else had access. And as my phone buzzed in my pocket, displaying an unknown number, I felt it deep in my chest. It wasn't closure. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The trial became the talk of the entire country. What began as a quiet scandal in Portland exploded into a full-blown national headline within days. News anchors argued over motives. Bloggers dissected every legal document they could find, and strangers online debated whether Gregory Reed was a monster or a misunderstood businessman. For me, it didn't feel like justice at first. It felt like exposure, like my family had been stripped bare for the whole world to watch. On the morning of the first hearing, the courthouse steps were lined with cameras and flashing lights. The air smelled like wet concrete and perfume. Reporters shouted questions as I helped my mother through the crowd. "Mrs. Reed, how did you survive?" "Michael, did you know your father tried to kill her?" "Do you blame yourself for what happened?" I didn't answer. I just kept my arm around her, guiding her past the noise. My mother wore a simple gray suit, her hair tied neatly back, but her hands trembled as we walked. She'd spent weeks in protective custody, moving between safe houses while the investigation unfolded. Seeing her out in public again felt unreal, like a ghost stepping back into the world. Inside, the courtroom was cold and quiet. My father sat at the defense table sharp as ever in his tailored navy suit, but he looked smaller now, somehow, like the power had drained out of him. His wrists bore faint red marks from the handcuffs. When his eyes met mine, I expected hatred. Instead, I saw something worse: disappointment. He still thought he was the victim. The prosecution began with the financial evidence, the offshore accounts, the falsified death certificate, and he bribed hospital staff. They laid out the trail of money like dominoes, one transfer leading to another until it all pointed directly back to him. Each revelation felt like a stab wound, reopening memories I'd tried to bury. But it was my mother's testimony that changed everything. When she took the stand, the entire room went silent. She spoke softly at first, her voice trembling as she described how he'd manipulated her, isolated her, and finally threatened her life when she discovered his crimes. "He told me," she said, her voice breaking, "that if I didn't disappear, he'd make sure my son never saw another day of peace. So I did what I had to do. I let the world think I was dead." The jurors watched her with wide, unblinking eyes. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, listening to every word. She spoke about the hospital, how a doctor loyal to my father had faked her records, how she'd escaped through a back entrance that night with help from a friend she'd once saved from bankruptcy. "For years, I was afraid of him," she said, her voice growing steadier. "But I'm not afraid anymore, because fear only works in silence, and I'm done being silent. I'll be continuing this story soon, but before we move on, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story is reaching around the world." The entire courtroom broke into murmurs. I felt tears sting my eyes, but for once, they weren't from grief. They were from pride. The defense tried to paint her as unstable, paranoid, but it didn't work. Too much evidence. Too many witnesses. My father's own business partner turned against him in exchange for immunity. The final blow came from Mark, who traced the last encrypted transaction straight to my father's private device. The verdict took less than 3 hours. Guilty on all charges. When the gavel struck, my father didn't move. He just stared straight ahead, jaw locked, eyes burning with something I couldn't name. Age, shame, maybe disbelief. I thought I'd feel satisfied watching him led away in handcuffs. But instead I just felt hollow. Because justice doesn't bring back what's lost. It only stops the bleeding. After the trial, the reporters swarmed again. My mother gave one short statement. No amount of money, power, or fear will ever bury the truth forever. She didn't take questions. She didn't need to. That night we went back to my house, small, warm, alive. Hannah cooked dinner while Lily showed my mother her new drawings. The laughter felt strange at first, unfamiliar, like the sound of something fragile learning to live again. Later, after everyone went to bed, I stood on the porch watching the rain. The storm clouds were finally breaking. Somewhere behind them, the stars were trying to show through. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. The ghosts were quieter now. The lies, the fear, the rage all fading into memory. My mother was safe. The truth was out. And I had learned something I didn't understand before all this began. Justice isn't revenge. It's peace. But even as the night settled calm and quiet around me, I couldn't shake one thought, one final thread of unease. Because there were still millions missing from those offshore accounts. And one of them was still active. A year passed. The world moved on from the Reed trial, as the world always does. The headlines faded, the documentaries stopped airing, and the internet found new scandals to devour. But for me and my mother, life didn't go back to what it was. It became something new entirely. She sold the mansion not long after the sentencing. That house was never a home, she said quietly, her hands tracing the petals of the daisies she was planting in her new garden. She bought a small cottage on the Oregon coast with white walls, wide windows, and a little gate that creaked when the sea breeze passed through. There were no more bodyguards, no more locked doors, no more whispers of fear. Just sunlight, paintbrushes, and the sound of waves breaking softly against the shore. Every morning she painted. Children from the nearby town often came by to learn from her, calling her Miss Evelyn with laughter in their voices. They didn't know her story, and she didn't tell them. She said she wanted to teach them how to see beauty in what's still growing. Watching her move again with color and life, it was like seeing a flower bloom after a storm that should have killed it. As for me, I left my corporate job months ago. I couldn't keep designing towers for clients who measured worth in square footage. Instead, I opened my own studio, Lighthouse Designs. Small projects, community spaces, public gardens, things that healed more than they impressed. The first thing I built was a little memorial pavilion in Portland, near the Willamette River. It wasn't for my father, not even for forgiveness. It was for the people who survive quietly, those who carry pain but keep going anyway. On the wall, I engraved a line my mother once said to me as a kid. Even broken glass can still catch the sunlight. My wife, Hannah, stood beside me at the opening, holding our daughter Lily's hand. Lily was 6 now, curious and bright, always asking questions that made me pause. My mother joined us too, smiling softly as she watched people wander through the space, strangers finding peace in something her pain had inspired. That evening, after the crowd had gone, we sat together by the water. The sky burned gold and pink, the kind of light that makes even ordinary things look sacred. Lily sat on my lap holding a daisy she'd picked from my mother's garden. "Daddy," she asked suddenly, her voice small and sincere, "why do you and Grandma always smile when it rains?" I looked at my mother. She smiled, her eyes glistening with the kind of peace I hadn't seen in her face for years. "Because," I said, wrapping my arms around my daughter, "we used to be afraid of storms. But now we know, the rain doesn't take things away. It makes things grow." Lily giggled, spinning the daisy between her fingers. "So the rain is good?" "It's the best," my mother said, laughing softly. "It reminds us we're still alive." We sat there for a while, the waves whispering against the shore, the world quiet and kind for once. The sea breeze carried the scent of wet earth and salt, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't angry anymore. I thought of my father then, not with hate, not with pity, just with understanding. He'd spent his whole life chasing control, power, and approval, and in the end it had left him alone. As the sun sank into the horizon, I whispered more to myself than anyone else. Happiness isn't in wealth or power, it's in living without fear. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. I'll be continuing this story soon. But before we move on, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story is reaching around the world.